they were going to pay. And we're recording. Okay. But anyway, hey, Stephen Oliver again. I'm here with Paul McManus, and Paul, I'll give a little bit of your background, but let's have you fill in the details here. I see you've done a lot of work with financial advisors, teaching them how to market themselves on LinkedIn, how to become more of an authority figure, and now how to write their own book, how to create and market themselves through a book in order to create that level of authority. Your website, we'll throw up in again at the end here, but is the shortbookformula.com.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got a podcast, which I've listened to a lot, the $1 Million Producer. And you're getting ready to launch a new one as well, or a new product as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I am. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but anyway, let's get started here. I was just giving you a little bit of my background. You know, I took the circuitous route to this industry 40 years ago next month. Instead of going on to Wall Street after graduating with a degree in economics at Georgetown, I ended up moving to Denver and opening a chain of 6 martial arts schools. I opened 5 schools in 18 months, 6 schools in 30 months, and was only able to do that because I had mastered sales process. I had really, pre-internet, lived in the Library of Congress learning direct response marketing. The Federal Trade Commission was doing hearings on health spas and tangentially martial arts schools. So I had pulled all the data that they had internally at all the big companies, and went to Denver with the idea of using effective direct response marketing, and in fact ended up with 2,500 active students training within 18 months, 3,500 in about 30 months. Oh. And really got pulled back into the advisor niche later on. And what happened is I was so high profile in the area that I kept getting asked by, commercial brokers, by managing partners at law firms, by financial advisors, how it is you're doing what you're doing. I was on all the major networks, and running infomercials and the daily papers and so forth. And ultimately I was looking for an advisor. At that time, I had a lot of employees, big staff. I was looking for deferred compensation plans and golden handcuffs for executives. And I ended up working with, fortuitously, one of the top 1/10 to 1% advisors in the country with Northwestern Mutual. But, as usual, we would sit down and talk, and I'd say, what are you doing for marketing? And it was, the answer was mostly, I went to a frat, and I talked all my frat buddies into it. And then I've been working referrals, and I have no other lead source, was really the answer.
The honest answer.
And from my perspective, it's like, well, have you ever thought about doing this? Have you ever thought about doing this? And what about this? And it just kind of evolved where I was, informally and then formally. I'm technically on staff at Northwestern Mutual. I'm not, I'm just a coach to, Peter, but that's how I kind of ended up in the niche. Now, am I correct that you came from outside the advisor niche as well?
I did, yeah. I'll try to make this short, but I actually went to college with the intent of joining the CIA, and fast forward from there, I ran my family's office products company, which had nothing to do with what I do today. And then in 2014, I discovered and fell in love with online marketing. I studied under a gentleman named Michael Port, who wrote a bestseller called Book Yourself Solid. And in 2015, I put my shingle up, so to speak, online, and I launched my business, More Clients, More Fun. And the initial intent of it was to help, at that time, coaches and consultants use LinkedIn to attract high-value clients. In 2016, my first financial advisor client found me. Up until that point, I had no idea what a financial advisor was, what a life insurance agent was. I was completely oblivious to the market, but this gentleman, his name was Shane Walls, he was following the work that I did, and he reached out to me one day and asked if I'd be open to working with him more closely. And initially, my thought was like, I'm trying to build something else, I don't want to do this. But over the course of 2 years, we built a very, very, very collaborative relationship. And the key thing there was that I helped him go from a couple $100,000 of target premium to over $2.5 million of target premium in roughly 2 years. And you can imagine, not only that transformation that cost for him, but, his producer group, his, life insurance carriers, they're, what's going on here? Tell us your secret sauce. And that's when I kind of hit the stage, so to speak, in the life insurance industry to start with. And I discovered that I really, really enjoy using my talents and expertise to help financial advisors specifically. People always ask me about, target markets, and it's a great question. And, oftentimes, as I'm sure you hear people say, it's like most people just want people that have, that have high income and high net worth. And that's great. I mean, we all want that to a degree, but I think at the end of the day, what makes business enjoyable and what allows you to become very successful in that is when you discover or find a target market that is a good fit for you, but you also truly enjoy working with.
Yeah.
And so financial advisors, I just love, just from the working with them as people. I think fundamentally most are, salespeople in nature. And to me, my company is called More Clients, More Fun. So you can imagine I like to have fun, and, it's just a very enjoyable, engaging relationship to work with them. But to the extent that I can help them create significantly meaningful results in their business, that's where I really enjoy what I do.
Yeah. And what you said there, not to gloss over it, is so important. When I first start working with an advisor, one of the first thing I say to them is, let's go through your list of your current clients.
Yeah.
And what are the commonalities among the
Yep.
ones that you really enjoy working with, that are a gift to the soul, that you really enjoy? What are the commonalities of the ones that you despise working with, right?
Yep.
If you were to take the top 10 that you really enjoy, what's common about them? Do they have
Yep.
the same hobby do you do? Is there a common career? What is the commonality? And I think it's even more general than you said. I keep hearing them say, well, who's your target audience? Well,
Yeah.
50 to 65 with at least $500,000 to invest.
Yep.
Well, okay. There's a lot of people
Yep.
in the US, much less the world, that fit into that category. Could we narrow it down to, they're in the, they're a plastic surgeon, or they're an MD, or
Right.
they're a fly fisherman, for God's sake, or something that brings them together. One of them, I tell people, I've looked through now probably thousands of advisors' websites. Anytime somebody comes into our, pipeline, we look at their LinkedIn profile, and we looked at their website and so forth. And I got to tell you could gag yourself with how similar, no differentiation. They all look alike. The LinkedIn profiles all looked alike. The websites all looked alike. But the ones that stand out are the guy has a picture of him fly fishing as his banner, and he's got a blog on fly fishing. Or there was another one who was a Texas A&M fan. Now I'm from Oklahoma, so I not only am not a Texas A&M fan, and we told Aggie jokes in Oklahoma growing up, but he's got the Longhorns and all the right colors and all this stuff, and he's just kind of like wearing his passion on his sleeve. To me, those are the ones that are interesting, the people that I'd like to do business with. On the insurance side, when I opened my first martial arts school, the guy next door was a State Farm agent, and this is in Denver, but he was an Arkansas fan. So he had, the huge, stupid Razorback hog thing on his wall, and he had, the colors and everything. Even his business card had a, suey pig, crap on it. Well, I'm not a Razorback fan, but that made John interesting. It made him unique. You remembered something about him, and it's shocking how it seems like they're having a contest to see who can be, no different than anybody else.
Well,
right?
Yeah, and to build off of that, I think the reverse of that is equally as important, if not more so. In other words, why are you relevant to your target market, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to have a theoretical exercise and say, hey, I want, plastic surgeons who make X number of dollars. Great. It's a great theoretical exercise, but why should they choose you versus the sea of other financial advisors that are out there in the marketplace? And, and to your point, everyone to your client or to your prospect, on the outside, everyone looks the same, more or less. And so you have to be able to differentiate yourself in a meaningful way and be able to demonstrate to them why you're unique and why you're relevant to them, why they should choose you over them. And that's really the question that I've been fascinated by over the past 8 years. And what that led me to was the idea that authority marketing, is that in order to be successful at a higher level and be able to really attract those higher level clients much more easily, you have to build your authority. You have to stand out. You have to demonstrate why you're relevant. And one of the fastest, easiest, most efficient ways to do that, in my estimation, is to publish a book.
Yeah.
Because as you know, there's a ton of different marketing strategies out there. They all have their pros and cons. But a book, what I love about the idea of a book and the way that we go about doing it is that we help our clients become published, go from, blank sheet of paper, so to speak, to published author in as little as 6 weeks. And suddenly you now have a brand, all the stories, the fly fishing, whatever it is that's relevant, that makes you unique and authentic and personable and relevant. Suddenly you've captured this in such a way, and you can deliver it to people and they can consume the information so that they can come to the conclusion that, wow, this person is actually very interesting, unique, different, and relevant to what I want to accomplish in my life.
Yeah. Well, let's subset that down into multiple components here. The first part that you said, which most people who haven't done it aren't going to believe, is the 6-week piece, right?
Yeah.
Is when I talk to advisors who haven't done a book, and I tend to tell them all that one of the best ways to position yourself as an expert is exactly what you're saying. But they always say to me, well, I don't want to take a year writing, and I don't want to do all this stuff. And I think they misperceive what you're talking about, what I'm talking about. And number one is probably length. Your URL is short book. What size book are you typically producing for an advisor?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And so, yeah, my whole book here, and I don't know if you can see it on the screen or if someone's listening, but it's called The Short Book Formula. And that's exactly what we preach. And so the length of the book that we recommend is roughly 12,000 words. And there's some reasons behind that. 12,000 words is enough to tell your story and create a compelling sales letter in disguise, so to speak, in a way that's effective. But at the end of the day, it's not just about how much time it takes to write it. It's you actually want your ideal target prospects, centers of influence, and other people to take the time to read your book, right? Is because your book is really your polished, best messaging that you can come up with. You've had time to think about it, articulate it in such a way that if someone would only read this or listen to it on the audio, they would be convinced that, wow, I need this, because you set everything up in such a way that it naturally leads to your services. Yeah. But the linchpin there is that, how many times have you received a book and you're like, wow, that looks so interesting. I would love to read that. Don't really have a lot of time, so I'm going to put it on the bookshelf. And one day when I have time, magically, I'm going to get to it. Yeah. And that's the challenge I see even the people that spend a lot of time and spend that year writing a book face, is that the book isn't doing the work that it should be. In our case, and part of the reason we're able to do this in 6 weeks, or 6 to 12 weeks to be fair, is that we target that 12,000 words, and we want the final product to be able to be read or listened to in roughly 60 to 90 minutes. Because then it becomes not just a marketing tool, but really it becomes a sales conversion tool. So as part of my sales process and the process I teach my clients is that, when you first meet someone, and this can be a complete stranger that, discovered you on LinkedIn and they're interested in your topic, they reach out, they schedule a call. Well, if they don't know enough about me, I'm not going to spend an hour of my time representing who I am and trying to just, and trying to build my value, et cetera. I'm gonna have a short 5 to 15 minute call. I'm gonna say, qualify them, so to speak. I'm gonna say, great, you sound like, it sounds like there might be a fit here. Here's what I'd like you to do. I'm gonna send you a complimentary copy of my book, or I'll send you the audio book, or both. And if you can, I'd like to have you read or listen to that. And we'll schedule a call for a week from now. And then we'll discuss, questions and next steps and things of that nature. How does that sound? 90% of the time they say, great. 10% they're like, well, I'm not really that serious. Oh, perfect. I don't need to waste my time. Yeah. And it's funny though, because part of authority marketing is not just this concept of, you have to live it, right? So you have to actually live it in the sense that your actions and behavior have to flow from that concept, that your time is valuable, that you're a benefit to the people that you serve. And so I was literally on a call yesterday with a potential client who'd be perfect fit. He does, I want to say 500 million of AUM. So, I'm like excited that this could be a really good client for me. And we were on our call number 2, and he had agreed to listen to the book before this call. First question I asked was, "Hey, have you had a chance to read the book?" And he apologized and was like, "No, I haven't had a chance to read them. Sorry, I'm busy." I'm like, "Great. Well, why don't we do this? Let's go ahead and reschedule the call for after you've had a chance to listen to the book. How does that sound?" Great. We scheduled the next call. We had a nice 5-10 minute chat, and now we're going to meet again in 4 weeks. But for me, if someone's not willing to take the time to go through the sales process that I've outlined, they're not a good fit for me.
Yeah.
And and by having the book and having that authority, so to speak, and being able to follow through on it in a way in a sales process that naturally leads people to follow your lead, that's the place that I love being in my own business. And that's the place that I believe most advisors would absolutely love to achieve for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And that 12,000 word piece is, you said it earlier, but most advisors are pretty good, if not very good, face to face with another individual. And in the martial arts industry, I found this was the same way. Getting them to sit down and write a letter, getting them to sit down and write a book, getting them to sit down and write an article is nearly impossible.
Yep.
But every day they were talking to people. They were really good at it. They were articulate. They had a cohesive presentation, one thing or another. So if I could just get them to record what they were doing, right?
Yep.
And then we can transcribe it and we can clean it up, right? But I find the same thing with advisors. I'm sure this is part of your process, is if I can just get them to, do an interview and explain it, or just talk to a video and explain it, or talk to another person and record it. Yep. Then all of a sudden you've got their process, their language, their stories, everything down. And I find 99% of them are very good at, expressing it verbally, and sometimes in horror at the idea of sitting down at a laptop and banging out something, because it just is outside of their normal operations. Is that a fair assessment of kind of your process?
Yeah. It 100% is. It's our whole process for our services is built around exactly that. Is that one, they feel that they don't have time, which is fair. They typically don't have confidence in their writing ability, which is also fair.
Yeah.
And to your point, they have these experiences and stories, and they tell these stories naturally, and they have the ideas, which is exactly what you want to make an interesting book. But they just need a process or an outlet to do it efficiently. And so our process, and this is why we can do it in 6 weeks, is that we meet with them for an hour on Zoom once a week over the course of 6 weeks. And it's a very structured process. So, we ask them to prepare in advance, maybe spend 1 hour preparing for the call, so they have just an outline structure of what the material for the call. But they don't have to write anything down. They're welcome to. They can take notes, they can do all that stuff. But at the end of the day, what we really get them to do is simply what you just said, is that we have them talk it out, articulate it. Yeah. We ask follow-up questions. We help guide that so that we're focused on the things that strategically move them, move the story towards, with their ideal client in mind. One of the things there is oftentimes people are so self-focused that we have to help them flip that around and say, okay, well, from your ideal prospect's point of view, how would they see that?
Right.
But it's amazing. I mean, I'm working with someone right now, really high-level advisor, and he has a whole educational course that he teaches as a in-person event, and he's walking us through it over 4 calls. And we're going to have probably 30,000 words. I mean, we have too many words. It's too much content.
Yeah.
But it's so easy for him because he's done this over and over and over and over again. And it's just a matter of us sitting down, giving him some process and structure, recording it, listening it. And then we do the heavy lifting of taking that and writing that as a compelling book. And so, but the content is fundamentally his. And I guess the point that I want to make, though, is that what I like and dislike about ghostwriting, and just maybe the idea is that if you outsource a book and you don't really inform it, your book's going to suck for most cases, and you're not going to really be attached to it. And you'll say, hey, I'm an author, but you'll never use it as a sales tool because this doesn't reflect your values and your stories and your opinions. Sure. And so we make our authors to go through the process. I could easily write the book for them if I wanted to, but it robs them of the journey, and it robs them of having their stories in the book, so that it's something that they're really proud of. And when they're having sales conversations, the most interesting and not interesting. The most rewarding thing is when you're meeting with a person for the first time and they're telling you your stories.
Yeah.
That's when you know you've done your job well as a marketer.
Oh, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. I say that the thing I like about podcasts, which is also true about books, is before you meet somebody, you feel like you already know them.
100%.
And a lot of these podcasts that I've done are people who I've listened to their podcast or I've read their
100%.
book. And, I already know, in some cases, the name of their dog or their cat or, what their hobbies are, the nickname for their kids or their wife, whatever. And it's all that personal content that builds rapport, is engaging, and makes you feel like you know somebody. And without that personal content, oftentimes you don't really have a ability to build trust with somebody, right? And again, I find that's something that advisors it seems like endemically they've been taught the opposite, is, not to share personal content, not to, tell stories about their life, that type of thing.
Yeah, and I'm a big so in my 8 years of doing this and working with about 500 advisors, there's about 3 things that I've seen consistently work for
Mhm.
advisors. And really this probably, extrapolates to anyone, but it's referrals. Referrals work, right? Referrals work for a reason. We don't need to get into why. The next thing is speaking.
Mhm.
And to me, podcasting is a form of speaking. Now,
Sure.
traditionally you go on a stage, you do this, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
But in today's world, you have the ability, like you and I are doing, is that you're in Colorado, I'm in California, and we have an audience and we're speaking. And this can be done 2 ways in podcasting. You can host the podcast, you can be a guest in the podcast. But the third one I'd say is writing,
Mhm.
because that really allows people to see your thoughts, personality, etc. But the crown jewel of writing is a book. For
Mhm.
example, if I said, hey, Stephen, I just wrote a white paper and it's
Mhm.
a darn good white paper and you should read it. Now,
Yeah.
your reactions be like, okay,
Yeah.
but it's not going to convey authority. It's not going to convey any of those things. It's not going to, and so a book, for I think historical reasons, the fact that so many people, it's probably on their bucket list. It's something that they like to do, but they never get to it. There's just automatic, immediate respect that we associate in our culture with writers. And so again, referrals, speaking, writing, if you just master that and the synergy between that, you can be extremely successful.
Yeah. And one of the things, and I promised to send you my book, but the process I did for this is actually, we sat down in a conference room, myself and an associate, and we created a marketing program for advisors.
Mhm.
And then went backwards and transcribed the marketing program for advisors, sent it out to a writer who cleaned it up. Now, I tend to be a little bit too much of a perfectionist, so I didn't like it very well. So I completely rewrote all of his stuff, to tell you the truth. But I mean, if I hadn't been so uptight about it, it would have been done
Yeah.
with me doing barely any, if
Yeah.
any of the writing. And in this case, this isn't the type of book you're talking about. This is more like a textbook than it is a lead gen business card book. I think the key thing you said about the primary thing here is it's a disguised sales letter
It is.
that positions yourself as an authority. And
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to jump in on something that you said there. So what I love about what you did, and I mean, at the end of the day, I think what you did there from a strategic point is what I recommend, is that at the end of the day, I don't encourage people to be writers so that they can, have some sort of, I don't know, at the end of the day, it's a business tool. It's a marketing business development tool. Now, there's a lot of other benefits. You get all kinds of benefits from writing, but at the end of the day, it should set up your services that you want to sell in a compelling way that your ideal prospect, when they go through this process, they're like, sign me up. I need this, right?
Oh, yeah.
But what you did was really smart. You started with the end in mind. You're like, this is what we're looking to do.
Mhm.
Now let's work backwards and create the book. I'm actually doing the exact same thing with the book that I'm working on now, which is called From Author to Authority, which is, I have a program that I just revamped that I want to start building up. And I realize that, it's so packed full of value, but if I just have someone come there and I'm trying to, explain it in 15, 20 minutes. It just does it a complete disservice.
Yeah.
And so I realized that I needed to write a book to successfully tee this up that, expands upon the challenges, the problems, the beliefs, and how ultimately this service solves that. And so, that's my motivation for writing the next book, is that I want to sell a service, and this becomes the vehicle for me to do it successfully, as well as then to go out in the world and market it, right?
You bet. You bet. You bet. The next thing with a book, and again, I've talked to any number of advisors who somebody talked them into doing a book. And now what they have is they have the book. Sometimes it's on Amazon, and they're doing nothing with it.
Yep.
And all of a sudden they think, well, they got, talked into something that wasn't worthwhile. And, I'm always asking the question of, well, what are you doing with the book to use it as a referral tool? Well, what do you mean? I ask people for referrals. Yeah, but do you give every one of your clients 5 copies of the book? Do you educate them on what your range of services are? Are you staying in front of your clients regularly and perhaps sending them a new copy of updated editions and so forth on a regular basis? One advisor I know really got to the point that he's doing a new book every quarter. And then every one of his clients gets 5 copies of his new small book, right? Because it's been such an effective referral tool. And and when it comes to a book, a podcast, all these different mechanisms, I view them as pass along tools to generate referrals. In part, is your clients are very bad at selling your service. Oftentimes, your staff aren't all that good at selling your service. But they're very happy to gift their friends something that they think would be valuable. And if you're not top of mind, and if you don't have something for them to pass along, which could be your podcast, but the book is much more tangible. You talked about the book sitting in the library. My joke is I have a lot of people I've done business with who I use their book as a coaster for 6 or 8, 9 months before I got back around to to going there, right? If nothing else, something physical hangs around it, tangible, it's sitting on my desk and so forth, which I think is the mistake people make of just doing ebook versions.
I think that's 100%. I mean, an ebook is really no different than a PDF. And while, initially our response is, the 5 ways to become rich, for example, I'm just kind of tongue in cheek, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Let me take a look at that. But we never read it. We don't remember it, and we forget about it. And so, I always tell people that it's, your best business card, but it's also compared it to like a brochure, right? So if someone gets a brochure, what do you do with it? You throw it in the trash. But business card, oftentimes just throw in the trash. A book just has that value where even if I'm not going to read it today, it's going to go into my library. And at some point in the future, when I'm, have a problem or a desire to achieve a goal that's related to the book, I'm much more likely to pull it out at that time. And so there's just that inherent value in it. But to your question, you're right. I mean, it's like, okay, you publish a book, and then what? So we handle both sides of that equation. Our first, we used to do it, I would say, backwards, which was, okay, let's start with LinkedIn. Let's figure out your messaging and try to attract you clients. And that has limited effectiveness because most people don't really have that well-structured, compelling brand story that you really need to consistently market and bring in the right people. Right. So we flipped it and said, okay, we're going to start with writing your book, because this is really your brand in a box. This is your message in a box. And this now becomes very actionable. So once the book's published, our platform of choice is LinkedIn. I've been doing this for about 8 years. Fantastic platform for reasons that, that we all probably know or assume.
Well, certainly for a financial advisor.
For a financial advisor, exactly. And so, but now you have to have strategies. And I think for most people, and this is why I'm writing my new book, is that most people, the advice that they're getting is not geared towards authors. Mm-hmm. It's generic LinkedIn advice. It may be for financial professionals. It probably is for just, your average run-of-the-mill professional. But the book that I'm currently writing and about to publish, it specifically answers that question. Yeah. I've published my book, now what? Which is why I'm calling it From Author to Authority, which is now, how do you really leverage your book in a meaningful way that you can build up a machine and seamlessly attract and draw in your ideal clients? I can give you a couple concrete examples if you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what, I'm always looking for, everything I do on LinkedIn is organic in nature, meaning that I don't use the paid advertising platform. And so LinkedIn has a couple functionalities that really disproportionately give you a strong reward. And so I'm always looking for that kind of the arbitrage between, okay, time, energy, and effort to what I get out of it. And so one of my favorite ones now is a combination of content, polls, and groups. And I'll explain that in a second. But if you were to actually look at LinkedIn's paid platform, the statistics show that to create 1,000 impressions would cost you an average of $33. So, 10,000 impressions would be $330, et cetera, et cetera. Through a combination of strategic post, poll, and groups, I'm able to effortlessly create essentially an ad that leads people right back to my book and post this out in about 10 minutes to about 6 different groups. And I'm getting just the past couple of weeks, I'm seeing 20,000 impressions per week. And this is in targeted groups that, are financial advisors, financial professionals, and the message itself is very specifically, it's not just like, fun content. It's not just, hey, here's a picture of my cat. It's very specifically about what the desire is, what the problem is. Here's how we help solve it. But there's 2 reasons why this works. Number one is that polls work because people are inherently want to express their opinion. In most social media posts, for example, as I'm sure you can relate to, it's like people say, hey, like and comment. And guess what? No one likes and comments. I mean,
Right.
it has to be actually really interesting or something to do it. But a poll gets around that because it's like, I can just click a button and I can express my point of view. How cool is that?
Yeah.
But what happens is that it trains the algorithm that people are interested in this, and suddenly your visibility skyrockets.
Yeah.
The other part of that is that a lot of people, the problem they have is that they don't have enough LinkedIn connections. And
Right.
so if I post to my LinkedIn newsfeed, well, I have a limited audience.
Mm-hmm.
But when you post in groups and you find the right groups to post in, suddenly you can get thousands and thousands and thousands of post impressions, regardless of the size of your actual LinkedIn network. I actually have 20,000 plus LinkedIn connections. And I was just running this as an experiment the other day. And I just did the same poll. And in my own LinkedIn newsfeed, I think I had about 1,500 impressions. I'm like, that's it for 20,000 connections. I did the same exact poll in 6 different groups. And it ranged from about 1,000 up to 8,000.
Yeah.
And you add those all together, I'm like at 20,000 plus in the course of a week. And so but you have to have the right content, right? It's like, you're not just posting for the sake of posting and, just et cetera. Every single one strategically leads back to your book or some aspect of your book. Hey, I have a complimentary copy of my book. Hey, I have a complimentary copy of my audiobook. And so you're creating that visibility that then naturally brings them back to your book, which now gets them into your sales cycle.
Yeah, and it creates a pull rather than just the cold
creates a pull
messaging that everybody is
yeah
doing.
yeah. There was another gentleman who just yesterday again reached out as a result of this and said, hey, can I can we jump on the phone for and I have an idea for a book.
Mhm.
And to me it's like, if going along with the idea of authority marketing, what's the correct answer? Well, here's my process is I'm happy to send you a copy of my book. Once you have a chance to listen to it, then I'm more than happy to schedule a call.
Yeah.
He replied back and said, hey, I'm kind of old school. I don't really do it that way. Can we just have a conversation? Which, the answer is no. I mean, I don't have that kind of time.
Mhm.
I want to talk to people that actually are motivated, educated, et cetera. And I'm not saying this to be like boastful or anything. I'm saying that this is what I want for all of my clients. And because that's what they want, right? It's like, you only have limited amount of time, a limited amount of energy. If you're just chasing down all these opportunities, what you're really doing is you're in chase mode, and then you complain about chase mode, but your behavior is suggesting that that's what you do.
Yeah. One of the cartoons I used in the book is the guru at the top of the mountain, and nobody ever sought out the guru at the bottom of the mountain. Right?
Exactly.
Is that's part of it is when you enforce your system on them.
Exactly.
It's a subliminal message of, one, I don't want to just, randomly talk to people. I'm busy. Number 2 is my schedule is tight. And number 3 is, here are all the things you need to know for you to decide if this is a good fit or not. before we waste any time doing that. It completely positions yourself as the guru. I'm sure we have a lot of mutual friends in the internet marketing world, and to use their language, a book is one of the best, if not the best, lead magnet, right? Yep. It's still seen as a very highly valuable commodity. And one thing is to try to get somebody's email address to opt into your newsletter. But if I'm getting a free copy of your book, and of course, I back to what we were saying a minute ago, I think they mostly make the mistake of, I opt in, you send me a PDF of your digital copy, I never look at it, and there's no, there's no real impact with it from there. So they make a lot of mistakes on the back end in almost all cases. But it is still the most valuable way to attract people by saying, basically, here's a compendium of my knowledge. I'm happy to share with you. And then that knowledge brings them back to seeing you as the guru and wanting to interact with you from there. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, and 100%. And what I love about the book as well is that, I've been doing this for 8 years, and and so a lot of people talk about lead magnet. Oh, it should be short, it should be concise. You get the opt-in. But part of the problem there is that then you get the opt-in, and then what? I mean, I think one of the challenges a lot of people have is that they do a poor job of a drip email campaign because they don't really have much content to do it. And so part of our approach is that we take the book as, again, it's the brand in the box, the brand in the book. And from that, it informs everything. So now I can easily create a 10, 20, 30 part email drip campaign somewhat effortlessly that is seamlessly tied back to the book, because all I'm really doing is taking the content in the book and I'm breaking it down into, into short email bits that help someone consume the content, suggest next steps. It also informs webinars. I mean, so another aspect on LinkedIn that I highly recommend is LinkedIn events. And LinkedIn events is another one of those tools that give you a disproportionate number of people sign up, and people say, well, what should the content be? It should be about your book. You can call it something differently, but the idea is that, you have this body of knowledge that you package inside your book. And now it's just a matter of how do you turn that into a webinar. If you go on a podcast like I'm doing now, what am I talking about? My book. It just becomes the basis of all the conversations that you have. And that, so I mean, it really just solves all the problems.
You bet. The LinkedIn events thing is, we've been doing a lot of experimenting with it for the past year or so. And it's really fascinating. One of the things that LinkedIn will let you do is you can, I think we have to use Zapier in the middle, but we can pull all the data into our CRM system.
Yep, exactly.
And so now, and most people probably stop at, they post an event, people say yes, they're attending or not, and then they do the event. But you can pull all that into your CRM system, and then you can kick off a sequence of follow-up emails. Now, I wish it'd let you pull the phone number and more complete, contact information.
Yeah. But and you can, though. I'll just give you my couple of quick tips. So I do something very similar. For that very reason. I mean, I can get, I do an event every month. I can get typically 400 or 500 people, quote unquote registered, at least showing interest, which to me is a solid lead, because they're showing interest in the content, they're self-identifying. But as and I know, it's, it can be a little bit disappointing from the standpoint that you don't have 500 people then showing up and saying, hey, this is great.
They don't really mean they're going to show up.
But you do have 500 leads. And so, so there's a couple of things there. It's always, I call it FitFu, or the fortunes in the follow-up, which is, okay, what do you do with that? Using Zapier and other tools. So I use a thing called Expandy.io, and I first bring them into Expandy. And when you do it that way, you actually do pull in all of their information. So everyone that has a phone number, it'll show their phone number, and it's about 80%, I think, roughly. But it'll seamlessly grab all their information from LinkedIn, and then it'll put in a spreadsheet. And from the spreadsheet, then I use Zapier to pop it into my CRM, because all the CRMs have their little limitations, and Zapier is a great little quick way to do it. But now I have 400 or 500 new leads that essentially cost me nothing. And now, because they've expressed interest in the topic, I deliver. I say, hey, and at this point, I just do a recorded event. Here's the event. Oh, and by the way, here's my book. And then I just have the drip campaign that extends on and on and on until they either take action, opt out, or do whatever.
Sure. Yeah. And without being too technical, that app that you mentioned, basically it scrapes the LinkedIn profiles,
It,
and
it,
and it pulls that data into a separate database. And it does
Yep.
this with LinkedIn's cooperation. It's not, it's not black hat stuff here. You have Sales Navigator, you hook that up, it pulls that data in, and then you can match the data with
Yep.
the people who are doing event registration. So you're absolutely right. We've been doing a number of things like that, and it works really well.
Well,
It,
and if I can jump in for a second,
yeah,
what's
go
really
ahead.
cool about that is that, it's like I always talk about, you want to scale what's working, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of it's just building the infrastructure. And so in my own case, for example, I take, I do that as a given. Every month I'm running an event. You set it up once, and now I have the messaging, the copy, the material. I don't need to continually reinvent the wheel. I just have my team implement that on a monthly basis. But I see the effect of it and how it works. And so now I'm looking for, so now I've found other opportunities to essentially provide the same presentation. I have the email drip and all those things. And so I'm going out and, part of my market is CPAs.
Yeah.
And so there's different places out there that you can pay, and they'll, set up the event for you. So every month now I do 2 other webinars for roughly 500 CPAs that actually do attend live, which is pretty cool. But they now go into the same format. I do the event, I get the emails, they go through my drip campaign. And so you're able to smartly scale these things in a way that is it's just synergistic, right? I'm not
Right.
trying to always find all these disparate things and put them together. It's like the basis is the book, because that's the messaging. And you start step by step building out webinar, LinkedIn, web, other stuff, podcasts.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to the group idea, is for an advisor, it necessitates, I guess, or the starting point is the who, right?
Yeah,
Defining the who, and
yeah,
I'm surprised at how many of them haven't gotten around to that piece.
yeah.
So you can find that who, in all kinds of different categories, professions, one thing or another. But until you define the who, you don't know what groups they're going to hang out in, right? You don't know where to go look for them. I probably overcomplicate things, but I tend to, let's go to SRDS and find all the magazines they read. Let's look at all the groups they're hanging out in. Let's look at, there's so many different ways to get to them, but only if you define them in such a way that it's narrowcast.
Yep.
I can go find cardiologists, or I can go find dentists, or I can go find petroleum engineers, or whatever it is I decide to target, tech executives in a certain niche. I can find those very easily on LinkedIn, and they all hang out in the same places. So you'll find groups sometimes with 200,000 people, or a small niche, maybe there's 2,000 or 3,000. But you can find them hanging out in groups. You can and by the way, that makes it much easier to target them, makes it much easier to connect with them. Everything else.
It does.
God, we could go on forever. We're going to run out of time in a couple of minutes here. This is great stuff, Paul. The going back for clarification, I think for everybody, is the purpose of the book is as a sales letter and as a marketing tool. It's not. Go ahead.
Yes, and as a sales conversion tool.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, one of the things that a lot of times we do is, the Dan Kennedy world calls it a shock and awe package. Put together a big mail package. I do that for our prospective clients. That for a while I'm slimming it down, but I had 3 different books of mine, in the package. And you said a couple of things. One is, even if they don't read the book, and they're more likely to read the book if it's engaging, it's personal, it's got interesting stories, less likely to read the book if it's highly technical and it's all about, and people want to do that. I think they want to make it about their technical knowledge. They do. Rather than about the client and building rapport with the client and what the client's needs are. Which is why
I think you need fresh eyes on it. In other words, is that it's harder for me to write my own book than it is for me to help someone else write their book, because I start getting too technical.
Right.
And you need fresh eyes to say, okay, you know a lot, but your average reader doesn't. And what is it that they need to know, ideally through a story, that's going to get them to have the light bulb go on and move them forward in this process. And so I think one of the biggest challenges that people don't realize is that, the curse of knowledge, and they just know too much about things that your average person doesn't relate to, at least in that jargon.
And doesn't care about or know that they should care about, right?
Yeah.
The advisors, I think, tend to default to, I'm a CFP, CHFC, I'm a, RICP, all, what there's, last I counted like 70 different designations or something like that. And even something like CFP, their average client doesn't know what that is, doesn't
Right.
care what that is, and
Exactly.
until you educate them. That's where all this is parallel. Your family business and the internet marketing all applies so specifically to financial advisors. The marketing I learned from marketing martial arts schools, for God's sake, is exactly the same thing. Martial artists, they all want to tell people they're a seventh Dan in this and they're the champion of this.
It's like, I don't know. All I care about is, can you kick my butt or not? I mean, that's about the extent of
it. They're marketing to the mom of a 7-year-old.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
And so, I'm telling them, look, number one is, you're in a male dominated industry by 98%, and the decision maker is a mom.
Mm-hmm.
And, you've got to write this as you're targeting their 7-year-old daughter to the mom.
Yeah.
And she doesn't care about all these things that you think are cool.
Exactly.
What she cares about is the outcome for her 7-year-old daughter.
100%.
And this is the same thing, except you're writing to a 52-year-old who's concerned about they're going to run out of money in retirement, in many cases. Or I have a good friend who's built a huge business showing dentists how to retire early. And what they're concerned about is, how do I not have to go in the office every day and stare in somebody's mouth?
Exactly.
He calls the company Freedom Founders. His name's Dave Phelps. But it's exactly the same thing. You've got to know who you're talking to, speak in the language that they're going to appreciate and understand. And there's so much opportunity there. And I think you've done a brilliant job with showing people how to use LinkedIn effectively, the groups, the events, the posts, how to get traction in Google's algorithm. Again, I talked about time blue in the face with people of, okay, so you posted something, you have 4,000 followers, 20 people saw it, right?
Yeah.
And you got to do the tricks to get the algorithm to take you seriously, to push it up, to do all those things. And you've got a really good strategy there. And of course, using the book as the magnet that then facilitates the sales process is super important as well. I'm surprised at how many financial advisors go into meetings cold and haven't done any prep work to either position themselves as the expert, or on the converse is to disqualify the prospect before they wasted the time.
Well, and when you say cold, there's two ways to look at that. I would say I don't want my prospect to be cold about coming into meeting with me, right? It's like, oftentimes when they fill out something, I'll do my due diligence and I'll look at their LinkedIn and stuff of that nature. But really, to me, what's more important is I want my prospect to know enough about me so that I don't have to start from ground zero.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of advisors fail, right? It's like, hey, I got a lead, I paid Facebook, someone got a phone number, now I called them 3 times and they finally agreed to have a meeting with me. I mean, you're setting yourself for failure, or either failure or just a lot of work that doesn't need to happen.
And they that's where I believe they revert to thinking that referrals is the only thing that works.
100%.
Right.
Because referral shows them that you don't have to do all this work. You can meet someone, you can immediately move into a solution, and you don't have to go through this whole education process. And so that's very smart. I'm going to steal that. That's where, that makes a lot of sense. And what I'm positing is that a book essentially can recreate that referral dynamic, but you're now not held down by the constraints of referrals, but now you essentially have a blue ocean of opportunity, but you can essentially recreate that referral dynamic.
Yeah. And it can multiply the actual referrals you're getting as a pass along tool, as an additional credibility tool, and so forth.
Yep.
Hey, Paul, I hate to do this. I have a hard break. I've got to be.
That's okay. I understand.
I've enjoyed this very much. I'd love to work together in any way possible. I think you've got some genius there. The short book formula is that the
Mhm.
best place to find
The
you
sh-
or connect with you on your
the
LinkedIn?
shortbookformula.com. If you Google me, just make sure to use my middle initial G. So it's Paul G. McManus. Otherwise, if you skip my middle initial, you're going to see that I'm an axe murderer out of Ireland. I can assure you that's not me.
Well, yeah, there was a rapist with my name as well as an actor, a poet, and a musician. So I understand the problem. And and of course your podcast, The $1 Million Producer. And so I'd highly recommend they follow that as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on today's podcast. And I just really enjoy having a chance to speak with fellow experts in the space because as anyone listening to this can see, we start geeking out in terms of, oh, the
Oh yeah,
Zapier
oh yeah.
Expandy and this and
Yeah, we could go on forever on all of that stuff. But that's exactly right. I mean, but again, to me, it's just the niche, unfortunately, is such a limited worldview of what's possible, and does such a limited job of really expanding their reach. And there's so much mythology going around the industry of what works and what doesn't work, and
Yeah.
and your help exploding those myths. Hopefully, I am too. So, on that note, we'll call it a day. And here we go.